Hey there, and welcome to the Reclamation Room. I'm Ashana, and I'm so glad you're here. This is a space for women reclaiming themselves after narcissistic abuse. If you've ever felt like you were too much, not enough, or both at the same time, you're in the right place. I created this podcast because I know what it's like to lose yourself in relationship, overgiving, overperforming, and still wondering why it never felt like love. I've walked through trauma, toxic relationships, and the long road of self-reclamation, and I'm here to walk with you. In this podcast, we'll explore what it means to come home to yourself after the confusion and chaos of narcissistic abuse. Some episodes will be solo, others will include guest interviews. All of them will be honest, grounded, and deeply compassionate. So, whether you're just realizing what you've lived through, or you've been on this path and you're ready for the next layer of your healing, you are welcome here. This is not about perfection. This is about reclamation. Hey friends, welcome back to the Reclamation Room, the podcast for women healing from narcissistic abuse and betrayal trauma. I am glad you're here because today I want to dive into something that can feel really messy when you're healing from trauma or navigating relationships, especially when it's people who you've experienced sticky situations with before and you're already kind of going into it with an expectation. So we're going to be looking at conflict. And I want you to just notice, as soon as I said the word conflict, did you notice anything in your body? Because sometimes it might make a stomach tighten or a chest feel heavy. I think it's really important to note here that conflict a lot of times has been seen as danger. It could have been seen as yelling, gaslighting, manipulation, silent treatment, and a lot of times conflict meant that you had to choose between either betraying yourself or walking on eggshells. If we've come to view conflict as a threat, we've learned that someone's going to win and someone is going to lose. But it's really important to understand that conflict is not as the enemy. We want to think of it in terms of unconscious conflict is what would be the enemy here. So I want to walk you through a plan today that I had to come up with for one of my classes for school. I plan to use this myself and also with my clients moving forward because it's going to let you hold space for yourself and for the other person without losing your peace or your dignity or your power. So I call this plan PACE, P-A-C-E, because the goal here is to set the pace of the conversation and not to let it drag you around or feel like you're losing your power. So PACE stands for pause and presence, assess reality, communicate your boundaries, and then exit or engage intentionally. So we're going to break this down. I'm going to give you some real life examples on the way, especially when it comes to these high drama dynamics that can try to pull us off center. So starting with P, pause and presence. So a lot of us, if we're being honest, we learned to react instantly when we feel threatened. So that could be by people pleasing, by defending our stance, by explaining ourselves to try to get the other person to come around, or possibly by freezing and shutting down. But remembering here that our power is living within that moment of pause, because that's when we have the opportunity to change the outcome and change the way that we've been doing things. So the first step here is going to be to stop and ground yourself, feeling your body, taking a breath, and reminding yourself, I'm safe. I'm allowed to take my time here. And I've actually talked about this one frequently because this is something I had to learn to use in the courtroom while I was on the stand being questioned about things that I felt personally had nothing to do with what we were there for. And, attorneys have a way of making you sound like you're stupid, making you sound like you're ridiculous, and the things that you're sharing are laughable, and they will try to turn them around and toss them back at you. And I started to squirm, right? I started to feel like I needed to defend myself. And I started to feel this activation of like, why is no one treating the other person this way? This is ridiculous. And so I had to learn to breathe, because even in the courtroom on the stand, they can't get you in trouble for taking a breath, right? And that's what I had been afraid of for so long, that anything I did or said was going to look bad to the judge, and then he was going to, quote, punish me for it. So this one is extremely powerful. It can help in very difficult situations. The pause helps create presence, which is going to help you not be sucked into chaos and into reacting. So for an example, if someone says something like, "You're too sensitive, I was just joking," sometimes we might rush to defend ourselves. Sometimes we might rush to throw it back onto them and be like, "I'm not too sensitive, you're just a jerk." But what we're going to do here is we're going to pause. And we're going to notice that the tiny moment of pause is disrupting the cycle of how we would typically respond. And it's reminding our nervous system that we don't owe anyone an immediate reaction. Okay, there's space here to change the way that we show up. So the next moment is going to be our letter A, assess reality. This is going to be checking on what's actually real and not what we're projecting onto the situation, and not attaching to what the other person is projecting onto us. Okay. I talk about in this podcast a lot, I talk about how we also don't show up as our best self sometimes. So it's really important that we're aware of both here. They might be projecting onto us, and I also might be projecting onto them. And self-accountability means I'm going to keep that in check when I can. So we've paused, we've found presence. Now we're assessing reality, asking yourself, what is actually happening here? Am I being respected? Is this a conversation or is this a power struggle? You don't want to be reacting emotionally. You want to be reading the room. You want to be staying curious. You want to be able to respond when you feel ready. So for an example, if they are shifting the blame or rewriting the history to convince you that that's not how it actually happened, that's going to be your cue. Have a reality check. This is not just a misunderstanding here. Either they really believe that this other version happened and that's their perspective, and I'm not going to be able to convince them otherwise, so I should stop trying. Or potentially this might be a manipulation, even if they're not conscious of it. And once you name that internally for yourself, it gives you the permission to stop negotiating with denial, right? Because if someone is in denial that you may have a different perspective of a situation, and if you are in denial that someone else may not be willing to see your perspective or may be manipulating you on purpose, you're going to keep negotiating. You're going to keep reacting. You're going to keep trying to convince. You're going to keep getting angry. So we're assessing reality here. Next is going to be the letter C, communicating boundaries. And this is where a lot of people freeze up. But reminder here, boundaries are not walls, okay? They're doors. They might say, this door is locked if this kind of action is going on. No, you cannot get in. It might say, I'm open to connection, but only if it feels safe, so the door can close at any moment. And a door may be completely open for one person and completely closed for another person. And you may decide to shift that over time. But that doesn't mean that it's just a wall that you've put up that has to be rigid and now you have to stick to it no matter what. Because remember, this is where you have the power. This is where communicating your boundaries is something that definitely needs to be practiced. And a boundary can sound something like, I'm happy to talk when we can both do that respectfully. It can sound like, I'm not going to accept being spoken to like that. And it can also sound like, if this conversation it continues going in circles, we're not getting anywhere, so I'm going to step away. And none of these are attacks. None of these are saying you're doing this, this, and this. They're very self-anchored because you're saying, okay, this is how this is causing me to feel right now. I don't want to feel this way. So we've got to figure out a different way to do this. And if we can't, it's not going to work out. With people who continue hurting, continue manipulating, continue questioning your version of reality and making you think that you're crazy, those people are probably going to test you on this step. They may try to guilt you. They may try to minimize the situation. They may try to escalate the situation and see just how angry they can get you. But here's the thing to remember. Your boundaries are not about controlling them, and they're not about determining how they act. They're only about protecting you. So when you can start consistently communicating them, you start feeling better able to do so, more confident in your ability to hold that boundary and to speak it respectfully but firmly. And something shifts inside of you. And you'll find that you're not going to be baited into defending yourself anymore. And you're going to start embodying more self-respect. So that was C. communicate boundaries. And now we have E, exit or engage intentionally. This is the final step, and it's probably going to be one of the hardest for trauma survivors because it means that we're choosing if it's worth it to us to stay in the conversation. And just looking at statistics here and the reality of what we call the trauma bond, we already have a track record of believing that we're not good at deciding if it's worth staying or going. We already have this story of, well, why didn't you just leave? So this could be triggering for some people. And that's why we had that pause and the presence in the beginning and the assessment of reality, because next comes this self-protective mechanism that has to kick in. We have to learn how to do this. So this part is remembering that not all conflict actually deserves your energy, because some people aren't arguing in a good faith effort to come to a resolution or to understand the other person more. Some people actually are arguing in order to drain your energy, confuse you, control you. And again, this may not even be conscious. We've assessed reality, we've communicated our boundaries. If we're able to communicate them in a way that is clear and a person continues to disrespect those boundaries, that's a pretty good indicator that they're not arguing in good faith. They're not here to have intentional conflict that is reaching a common goal. This is destructive conflict at this point. So you've paused, you've assessed, you've set a boundary. If they're meeting you halfway, it might be a good idea to engage intentionally, but make sure that you stay grounded, stay curious, see if repair is actually feeling possible here, see if you have a common goal of repair. And if they're not meeting you halfway, or at least seeming like they're attempting to, as in something is changing, some kind of connection here is happening where they're able to either logically see your point of view and work together towards a compromise or collaboration, or maybe they have actually made changes about this in the past and this is becoming a smaller problem. Maybe you're revisiting it and you're tweaking a boundary a little bit, getting some clarity. If they're not doing any of those things, or if your internal compass is saying, no, my boundaries are being crossed here, regardless of whether or not it seems like they're meeting me halfway, this continues to be a problem. My body says exit gracefully. Okay, so the E can stand for exit or engage, and this is going to be intentionally. Exiting gracefully does not mean that we have to have that mic drop moment of goodbye, I'm blocking you, I'm not doing this anymore, have a nice day. I mean, it might mean that to you, but what it might also mean is ending the conversation, leaving the room, or sometimes it might just mean reevaluating the situation completely and coming back to it later. So it doesn't have to be something that lasts forever and has the last word. Sometimes it can just mean setting a boundary that is not meant to go further in the conversation, but rather to stop it or pause it. You can come back later. You don't have to if you don't want to. But either way, remembering here that walking away is not weakness. It's showing an actual wisdom of sorts of, I have learned how to not react in this situation. I want to come back when I'm able to respond. And if I'm not able to do that, then this might not actually be worth my time. And I've learned enough about myself to be able to honor that. So just a reminder here for anyone who has struggled with conflict and has kept sticking it out and trying, this was a lesson that I had to learn. I just want to share it with you. Your worth is not proven by how much you can endure. Your worth is something that is already there. It can't be taken away. But I have noticed that when you learn to walk away from things that are dishonoring you, that's when you start to see your worth a little bit more. It's not a moment of magically seeing your worth and then walking away to protect that. Rather, it's taking the action steps to protect the worth that you may not even believe is there, but you're like, I'm going to protect myself in this moment because assessing reality, this is not safe, and I know that I deserve better. I know that I don't have to wait for someone to validate me or believe me. So let's say you're in a conversation with an ex who keeps trying to suck you back into old dynamics. And so they might start with what we hear called love bombing. They may be guilt tripping. They may even be blaming you to goad you back in. You may feel awful, feel guilty, and you might even feel a familiar pull to explain your side of what happened. So just remember PACE, P-A-C-E. Pause, take a breath, remind yourself, I'm safe. I don't have to immediately answer. A, you assess. Assess reality. This is not this person taking accountability for their portion. This is a manipulation because they're leaving all of this on me. C, we're setting a boundary. communicate your boundaries. I'm not going to keep having this conversation if it's just about finding blame. This isn't going to get us anywhere. E, exit or engage. In this case, if you exit, I'm going to go now. Take care. The end. It doesn't have to be a big argument if you don't want it to be. You don't owe anyone more of an explanation. And so the thing to focus on here is you didn't try to fix them. You didn't try to over-explain to them. You didn't spiral. This is a situation where instead of performing, you chose peace. And that's what we're going for here. So that's the plan for me and the plan that I'm going to share with my clients moving forward. PACE, pause, assess, communicate, exit, or engage. It is simple. Sounds kind of cliche, but it's going to be powerful, I feel, for me at least. And I think the more we practice these things, the more natural it's going to become to protect peace without feeling that hardening of the heart or the closing off or blaming someone and having to be afraid of that next time it comes around. I think the more we're able to do these things, the more confidence we build in ourselves. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I need help actually doing that. This sounds great, but in the moment I get so triggered and this keeps happening. Situations keep repeating. I want you guys to know that is literally some of the work that I do with women in my one-on-one coaching. So when we're working on this, we go deep into the nervous system regulation, which helps us figure out the boundary clarity and the communication skills so that you can stop abandoning yourself in conflict and so that you can actually start trusting yourself and trusting your voice again. So just throwing that out there for anyone who wants to try the one-on-one coaching, you are welcome to join us on our free women's call every Tuesday evening. We actually unpack topics like this together, and it's live in a safe space with like-minded women. And it's a really great way to get a feel for how I coach and come and have community and connection with other women who get it, and they may actually have feedback on your situation. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes if you want to join us there. And I just want you to remember, conflict does not have to mean chaos. Okay. A lot of us grew up in chaos and that's what we've gotten used to. So it can feel kind of scary to step out of that comfort zone and learn new ways of doing things. But with the right tools, it actually becomes an opportunity to learn to stand more rooted in who you really are and figure out who that is so that you can walk away when that's what you need to do to protect that version of yourself. So that is it for this episode. I want to say thank you for listening. As always, if it resonates, please rate the show, share it with a friend, leave a comment if you'd like. I welcome collaboration here. And next week, I'm going to be bringing an amazing guest on the show. I'm going to be chatting with Kate Gregory. She is a women's holistic hormone practitioner, and she shares how women can fix their periods, boost their energy, and actually feel good again. I'm super excited for you to hear that episode. She's also going to have a code for listeners to get a discount off of her mini course. So stay tuned. Please subscribe so you get notifications when that next show goes live, and I will see you next time. Thanks for listening. Thanks for spending time in the Reclamation Room. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if this supported you, consider sharing it or leaving a review. You're not alone, and your reclamation is sacred.